Welcome back to Man vs. Weed, the cannabis review podcast where we smoke government cannabis and see if the dog will talk to me. I'm Tango Hotel Charlie, the host and guinea pig. My non-cannabis using wife picks the strains and I put it to the test by smoking a full gram in one sitting. I then examine the effects and tell you all about it. If you want to follow me on Twitter, find me at StreetVillain. And if you want to send me an email, it's manversusweedthc@gmail.com. So, as I mentioned last episode, there was only two choices for Rob in the whole cannabis store. It's almost as though they don't want you to be able to smell, see, touch, or taste any of the product without paying up. So today's strain is going to be Chocolate Fondue by DNA Genetics by Tweed. Ugh, Tweed. Another one of those pro-crim corporate LPs that I would never buy, and the concept of this silly podcast wins again. So, Chocolate Fondue by DNA Genetics. Or is it Tweed? Or is it Canopy Growth? I don't know, it's all the same fucking thing. See, back in the day, Tweed was one of the first legal producers. When legalization came about, it was handed over to a bunch of politicians and cops. Google it, I encourage you. The list is so long you would almost suspect cronyism. Anyway, Tweed just happened to be founded by two guys, Bruce Linton and Chuck Rafisi. Rafisi just happened to be the CFO for Trudeau and his Liberal Party. You know, the same party responsible for legalization. And Trudeau went on to be guilty of multiple conflicts of interest, and this was just one of many. So Rafisi's Tweed not only got first crack at legalization, but they got it before any other company. Not suspicious at all, right? At the same time, these guys make statements claiming to be the safe moral standard, and black market cannabis are criminals with questionable sources. They claim that illicit cannabis is dangerous and tainted with deadly fentanyl. They were super arrogant with claims of creating jobs and killing the black market, and then we come to find out, back in 2014, they were caught by the RCMP shipping 700 kilograms of cannabis of dubious origins, destined for sale to unsuspecting Canadians packed into hockey bags. I don't know about you, but that seems like an odd way for one of the only legal producers in Canada to ship a product. Anyways, the cops jacked that shit and prepared to have a masturbatory press conference. These guys love posing in front of a pile of grams and a stack of $10 bills. If you think they weren't tripping over themselves to pose in front of 700 kilograms of weed in giant duffel bags, you're crazy. But that presser never happened. Turns out Tweed was just starting to trade publicly and the RCMP didn't want to influence the stock prices. What an amazing courtesy. And just like that, it was buried. Or it would have been had some journalists not dug into it and filed a Freedom of Information Act request. But even then the cops refused to comply, and it took 5 years and a complaint to the Federal Information Commissioner before they released some of the records. Some. Then Tweed decided they were going to release their own version of events. They claimed the shipment was completely approved by Health Canada and that they had invited the cops themselves to come inspect the shipment. Well, the cops spit out their Tim Hortons when they heard that, and described it as brutally misleading. As it turns out, Health Canada approved plants and seeds, not bud and duffel bags. And they didn't invite the police, it was actually the airline wondering about the legality of the 700 kilograms of weed and duffel bags at their airport. In the end, the cops destroyed all the cannabis, and Tweed faced no punishment. I guess it pays to have friends in elected places. Anyway, like I said, they went public before any other producer. They were throwing around investor cash and bought up to like 1 million square feet in grow space in the span of 8 months. These guys thought they could do it better than the current system if they just spent a shit ton of money. It certainly doesn't hurt that they were partially bought up by the largest alcohol producer and marketer in the US, a company called Constellation Brands Inc. Cash was injected, dreams were inflated. They started buying up multiple brands like Metrum and Tokyo Smoke. Incidentally, Metrum also got ganked by the cops the same day as Tweed at the airport. Interesting. These guys are dictionary definitions of culture vultures. Suits with access to investors' cash that think they can do it better than the Canadian craft growers that fought for the legalization that they're now profiting from. The same folks LPs paint as criminals and lobby the government to raid. But it turns out cash doesn't mean quality cannabis. And this is reflected in sales, and instead of taking responsibility, they blame the black market. Police conducted their raids, and the sales continued to drop. Stocks plummeted, investors grew angry. Eventually they moved on old Chuck Rafisi, founding member and ex-CFO of the Liberal Party. Citing his inability to meet expectations, he was ousted by the board and replaced by sad puppy and co-founder Bruce Linton. But that didn't help. It didn't matter how much money they were given or how much help they received from cops, politicians, and celebrities. Turns out their cannabis was just overpriced trash, and there's nothing you can do about that except for grow better weed. Constellation was buying more and more of the company, and they started flexing more and more until eventually Bruce was sent packing as well. He, of course, was replaced by former Constellation Brands CFO and Executive Vice President David Klein. At this point, Constellation owns 40% of the company, and the takeover is all but complete. Sparked by poor sales and a failed edibles line, gone are the days of job creation and massive land grabs, replaced by plummeting stocks, countless layoffs, store closures, and selling off those massive greenhouses at giant losses. So today's strain is Chocolate Fondue by DNA Genetics from Tweed, by Canopy Growth. Brands under Canopy Growth include Tweed, Martha Stewart, Houseplant, Tokyo Smoke, DNA, Leafs by Snoop, Doja, and Ace Valley. But it's all Canopy or Tweed or whatever you want to call it. It's all the same shit. Basically, it's a shell game, and each brand is a shell, but it don't matter which you pick because the ball is always Canopy. It's a game of deception where the player always loses under the guise of winning. It's like if Constellation owned Pepsi and Coke. They wouldn't give a shit which one you pick because either way they're getting your money. So DNA Genetics is a company that has won a bunch of awards outside of Canada. What they do is they license their name and logo to Tweed. Tweed then uses that implied reputation to mitigate their own less than fantastic rep. So you're just paying for a name on a Canopy product. When you go to the DNA Genetics Canada site, it says in capital letters, Cannabis Pioneers. Under that, all it says is they were founded in 2004. There is a Learn More button there, so of course I click on it, because yeah, I want to learn more about these Cannabis Pioneers. Except for when I click on it, it just takes me to their strain page, so I thought I clicked the wrong thing, and I clicked the back button, and sure enough, nope, that's it. That's all the information you're getting. Moving on, I scroll down to the chocolate fondue on the strain page, and continuing the theme here, there's little to no information for that either. It says it's a unique UK cheese flavor profile with a complex aroma that is funky, robust, and sweet. Now, I don't know what funky or robust taste like, but I love to try new things. It claims to be 18 to 20% THC, so it should be strong, right? And that's all the info you get. A picture of the box, and a link to go buy it. Other than a lot of bragging about the awards won by the folks they bought their name from, there is not a lot to go on here. One clue, however, is the line, DNA is giving their stamp of approval on select Canadian varietals. In other words, they just sold their name to be used on a Tweed product, and other than that, that award-winning company has nothing to do with the cannabis they're selling. It's a bait and switch. If you take a quick look at the DNA Wikipedia page, you'll find that they're all about selling merch and licensing their name. Just another shell in the game. So this week's gram came in the largest plastic jar yet. Bigger than the jars that come packed in boxes. The cap was easy to open and there was no safety seal. Which is a surprise because that's how you lock in the terp ghosts. At any rate, there was no ghost here. It long escaped its plastic prison. Inside, there was no moisture pack, only a couple popcorn nuggets of dry, lifeless Canadian legal cannabis. There was no robust, and there was certainly no funky. Just a faint, nondescript weed smell. Like a bag that once held cannabis. Dingy and faint, only when brought up to your nose, as is customary. Under the microscope, the trichomes looked very strange. Almost melted or corroded looking, or crusty, like something was on them. And many were missing heads or were degraded to the point that it was difficult to discern the head from the stalk. They were withered and spindly, almost hairy looking. Many of the trachs that were visible were amber. But overall, they looked mostly gloopy. I can only guess the cause of this, and I can't seem to find any info beyond what I could speculate. So I can't say for sure what the fuck is going on here, and it's at this point I begin to wonder again if this podcast is worth my health. In my fingertips, the buds crumble to dust. Crunchy, dry, and lifeless. When I squish it, it powders but leaves no sticky residue on your fingers at all. No smell is released when you crush it up, just a lifeless powder. When I rolled it into my raw organic paper and glass tip, I was pleased to find that it actually filled the paper, a low bar the last review didn't even clear. But right away, first puff, I noticed how harsh it was. It had a musty flavor that burned my nose and throat and left a bitter aftertaste. The smoke was rough and unenjoyable. I started to feel a headache building pressure in my temples before I was even halfway done smoking the thing. The ash was a dingy gray, and for some reason the lighter parts had a brown tinge to them. It burned without needing to be relit, and the buzz was very mild to medium at best. The high lasted about 30 minutes, and then I smoked my own weed about an hour later. Once again, I suspect this is caused by the damaged trichomes. At $11 a gram plus tax, or $300 an ounce, this is completely unacceptable. So would I choose this over black market cannabis? Hard pass. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Man vs. Weed. I hope you had a great 420. If you like what you hear, please make sure you like, review, subscribe, and maybe even recommend me to another cannabis head in your life. Make sure you follow me at StreetVillain on Twitter and email me at manversusweedthc@gmail.com. Until next time, free the weed.